It's time to play the blame game using the red-white Precon for Murders at Karlov Manor. Now, this deck is all about goading your opponent's creatures and trying to force them to attack each other while you kind of sit back and pick up the scraps as you go along and finish them off at the end of the game once they've done pummeled each other to death. So at this point, let's take a look and see what we can do to make this deck more thematic. Now, the rules of this are very simple. The cards I'm adding to this deck only come from a Ravnica-based set. There's not going to be any kind of souped up power cards from any other set, only the 10 sets that have taken place in the Ravnica plane. Now, as such, this actually is going to have two variations of this deck because the two commanders that come with this deck are very different from each other. So let's start with the one that's the front face and the easier version of the deck to build around, and that is Nelly Borca, Impulsive Accuser. For 2, a red and a white, you get a 2/4 human detective with vigilance that says when it attacks, suspect target creature and then goad all suspected creatures. Whenever one or more creatures an opponent controls deals combat damage to one or more of your opponents, you and the controller of those creatures each draw a card. So the main point of this commander is that you attack, you goad their creature, you suspect it, then it can't block Nelly Borca, so she's likely to survive a lot of combats and, create favorable blocking matchups so she survives and keeps goading their stuff. And you're making more and more of their stuff unable to block. They're going to be attacking each other, and they're just going to be unable to stop each other from pummeling each other as you go along throughout the game. And then the icing on top of all of this is that you are going to be drawing cards, especially once you get multiple things going through. So whenever one or more creatures start dealing combat damage to one of your opponents, you're going to be getting a card probably every turn because they're going to be attacking each other with goaded creatures. So you're going to be gaining at least 3 cards a turn cycle, plus whatever you might have going on otherwise. So the deck doesn't have a ton of extra card draw in a lot of places because this commander alone can give you a lot of card advantage. To that end, I want to put more stuff from the Ravnica sets into this deck, and so I'm going to go through and I'm going to cut mostly things that show up on other planes for the most part. So anything that is either something that does not really work well with the deck or belongs to a different plane of existence, I'm not going to include it here. That includes cards like Darien, King of Keldor, Atali Primal Storm, Gisela Blade of Gold Knight, Kazul Tyrant of the Cliffs, Lauren of the Third Path, Elspeth Sun's Champion, Savine's Reclamation, Winds of Wrath, and Stalking Leonin. These cards are just not here on the plane. They have locations in other places. They're characters that show up in like Dominaria and Kamigawa and Innistrad, Ixalan. There's just different places these things go from. I'm also taking out Ancient Stone Idol because it just really doesn't have anything to do with what's going on in the deck, so I don't feel like we need to have this here. And then I'm also taking out the new commander that comes in this deck, Feather Radiant Arbiter. She has nothing to do with what Nelly Borca is trying to accomplish, and she very barely allows you to actually do much of anything because you have to target her in order to make copies. Well, you don't really want to goad your own creature with some of the abilities that you're targeting with. So in the end, we're not really going to utilize her to her best extent. So she's actually going to be slotted into a different version of the deck that will come a little bit later in the video. So with all those cuts, let's take a look at some creatures that we want to add to the deck. And I'm going to start with 3 creatures that come from the brand new main set. First up is Aurelia's Vindicator. For 2 white, it's a 4/2 angel with flying lifelink and word 2. And it has a disguise where you can flip it up for X3 and a white. When it is turn face up, exile X other target creatures from the battlefield and or creature cards from graveyards. And when this leaves the battlefield, return the exiled cards to their owner's hands. Now, this card right now is pre-selling quite expensively on TCG Player, but on Card Kingdom, where I'm looking at this right now, it's not as bad. It's only about $8 there. So be careful what you buy with this card. I don't think this card is going to be a $25 card by any extent. I think it's too slow for standard right now, and it's not like the best removal type thing that you could use in Commander either. But in our deck, I like it because it has the ability to exile things that have gotten removed from our graveyard to get them back when it dies. It has ways of clearing the path to finish off an opponent for us, and it's a decent body to swing at our opponents as well. And since Nelly Borca can suspect creatures for us, we're also going to include the new Agris Kaz Spirit of Justice, 2 red-white, 2/4 Spirit Detective with double strike and vigilance. And when it enters the battlefield or attacks, choose up to 1 target creature. If it was suspected, you get to exile it. So if you have a problematic creature that you just can't leave laying around because it has some kind of activated ability that can still mess with you even though it's attacking your opponents, you can get rid of it. Or we can just keep adding suspected to our opponent's creatures to make it so we can punch Nelly Borca through and keep those things rolling along. We're also going to include the new Vengeful Tracker. It's a 2/2 for 2 human detective. Whenever an opponent sacrifices an artifact, it deals 2 damage to them. So if your opponents, especially if they're running a treasure deck or any of the new clue decks or whatever, this is a great card to include because in order to use their stuff, they're going to have to get shocked for it as long as this is sticking on the board. So I love this thing against Dockside Extortionist. I love this thing against the new cards that create tons of clue tokens. Food decks, there's all kinds of stuff that this really slows down and actually just flat out turns off some of their stuff. Now, since we took out Lauren of the Third Path as a way to blow up an artifact or enchantment when it comes into play, I did notice that there is a card from the original Ravnica stuff, Keening Apparition for 1 and a white. It's a 2/2 that you can sack to destroy an enchantment. Now, we lose the benefit of getting rid of artifacts, but it gives us an on-world way to get rid of enchantments if we need to, and if not, the body sticks around and we can mess around with that to try and attack our opponents, or use it as a blocker, then sack and get rid of something. Then we're going to jump over to the Gate Crash set and look at the Luminate Primordial for 5 white. You get an Avatar 4/7 with Vigilance that when it enters the battlefield, each opponent exiles up to 1 target creature that they control, and that player gains life equal to its power. So we get a Super Swords to Plowshares type effect attached to a decent sized 4/7 body, and we're able to get rid of multiple bad things on the opponent's side of the board, or maybe you just don't have time to get them goaded so they can't attack you, so you just slam this down and get rid of it before it's too late. We're also going to include a copy of Faith's Fetters from the original Ravnica set for 3 and a white. You get an enchantment aura, enchant permanent, so it doesn't have to be a creature. It can take care of other things like the One Ring. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life, and the enchanted permanent cannot attack or block or activate its abilities unless they are mana abilities. So as I said, like the One Ring, if you put this on it, it can no longer draw your opponent cards, and if they've already got burden counters on it, it's just going to sit there and ping them over and over again until they can get this off of it. There's also just, flat out just take out a big creature that might be threatening you, a commander, maybe you got a Voltron commander coming after you, you can just slap this on there and they can't hit you to 21. There's a lot of functionality with this card, and it gives you a nice little burst of life at the same time. And then since we took out the Winds of Wrath, we're going to include a Ravnica tinge of wipe of some sort in Mizzium Mortars for 1 and a red. It's a sorcery that deals 4 damage to target creature you don't control, or you can overload it for 3 and triple red to make it deal 4 damage to each creature you don't control. So either way, we're going to have the ability to either single target remove something or overload it and kill all the small little stuff that they might have and keep Nelly Borca and all that stuff coming on through. And since this is a Boros deck, we're going to include Boros Charm. Red-white, instant, choose 1, deals 4 damage to target player. Permanents you control gain indestructible until end of turn, or target creature gains double strike until end of turn. So there's a different things that we can do here with this. We can use it to, double strike, finish somebody off. If somebody's trying to board wipe us, we can go ahead and just use this to make our stuff indestructible. Or maybe we just need to do 4 damage to somebody's face and get them off the board that way as well. There's a lot of functionality here where you can just pick and choose what you need at the time and move along with the game. Then hitting the Ravnica Allegiance set, we're going to add a copy of Unbreakable Formation. 2 and a white, instant, creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. And addendum, if you cast it during your main phase, put a +1/+1 counter on each of your creatures and they gain vigilance until end of turn. So this can be used to bolster your stuff, and then you can use one of your wipes. You can use this to survive a wipe on your opponent's turns. There's all kinds of things you can do here, or you can just use it as a pump to push across that last little bit of damage that you need. So again, this is a great card, and I love that it was in the Ravnica sets to add here. And since this deck was all about, controlling what your opponents are doing by goading their creatures and making it so they can't attack you, I thought I would include a copy of Master Warcraft for 2 and 2 hybrid Boros. You have an instant that says cast only before attackers are declared. You choose which creatures attack this turn, and you choose how each creature blocks this turn. So you can make it so you can force somebody to attack, like maybe they were just like, I'm just going to attack this person so I don't get messed with the other guy, and you can just veer all of their stuff over that way and make it so things are going to die more favorably. You can choose the blocks to get rid of things, or maybe you just don't want them to block at all and make sure that all the damage comes punching on through. And this is just a fun card, and it fits so well with what we're trying to do here. And then the last new card I'm going to add here is Connecting the Dots. For 1 and a red, whenever a creature you control attacks, exile the top card of your library face down. And it says 1 and a red, discard your hand, sack Connecting the Dots to put all the exiled cards into your hand. Now, while I said Nelly Borca is great at giving us card advantage, you can't exclusively depend on her sticking around long enough for you to get that advantage. So So we need to have another way of kind of getting our hands on some cards. And this is a great way to do it because as our creatures are attacking, this is just going to exile a card. And then we can pop it off later and just fill our hand back up if we're running low or need answers all of a sudden. So all in all, I actually did not remove any of the brand new cards that came in this Precon because they all fit what Nelly Borca is wanting to do. So let's take a real quick look and see what those new cards are so you understand why I didn't remove them. First is Havoc Eater for 5 red, 3/3 flying elemental that when it enters the battlefield for each opponent, goad up to one target creature that opponent controls and put X counters on Havoc Eater where X is the total power of the creatures goaded this way. So this is a mass goad mechanic for us and we can go ahead and do that. So that fits perfectly with what we're doing. Then we have Otherworldly Escort for 3 and a white. If it dies, if it's not a spirit, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with 4 charge counters on it. It's a spirit detective. Then you can pay 1 and a white, tap it, remove a charge counter from the escort, and destroy target creature that was dealt damage to you this turn. So you have a way to remove cards, and it fits really well here, and I didn't want to remove it without, just cause. Another interesting way here to go to our opponent's creatures is Immortal Obligation. For 1 and a white, it's an instant. Return target creature card from an opponent's graveyard to the battlefield under their control with a duty counter on it. And for as long as it has that duty counter, it is goaded, can attack you or a permanent you control, and it cannot block creatures you control. So it's almost kind of like a super goad version. So you can kind of pop on through it and go ahead and just use this that turn and have it not be able to block your stuff, and then it can come smashing your opponents later on down the line. Then just like Master Warcraft, we have a new version here. Take the Bait for 2 red, white, instant. Cast a spell only during an opponent's turn and only during combat. Prevent all combat damage that we dealt to you and planeswalkers you control this turn. Untap all the attacking creatures, goad them, and then there is an additional combat phase after this. So you can, you're going to come after me. Well, you can just go ahead and take the bait, and all of a sudden it's like, nope, you're going that way. You don't get to control where the goaded creatures are going to go, but at least it kind of saves your butt for a turn and sends them at your other opponents instead. And then we have a new clue. It's Ransom Note. For a colorless, you get an artifact clue when it enters the battlefield, surveil 1. Then you can pay 2 colorless and sack it. Choose one of 3 options. Cloak the top card of your library, goad a target creature, or draw a card. I like it for the goad ability. The cloak ability is kind of cool because then you're able to, generate a threat if you need to, or you just can cash it in and draw a card. Then we have another goading card in Hot Pursuit. For 1 and a red, it's an enchantment that when it enters the battlefield, suspect target creature an opponent controls. As long as Hot Pursuit remains on the battlefield, that creature is also goaded. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if 2 or more players have lost the game, gain control of all goaded or suspected creatures until end of turn. Untap them, they gain haste until end of turn. So not only does it have Nelly Borca's ability to suspect and goad a creature attached to it, it also has a trigger that if you've already taken out 2 of your other opponents, the last opponent is about to have a onboard insurrection coming at them, where all of their goaded and suspected creatures that you've been messing with them this entire time are going to turn on them and attack them instead. We also have a goading enchantment here in Redemption Arc for 2 and a white. It's an aura enchanted creature. Enchanted creature has indestructible and is goaded, and then you can pay 1 and a white to exile it. So this has the ability to basically give the biggest, baddest creature on your opponent's side goad and indestructible for the rest of the game. And if they decide they don't want to play your games anymore and remove Redemption Arc in response, you can just exile the creature and get rid of it. No more fuss out of that, and they don't get their thing if they're not going to play with you. We also have an interesting sorcery in Prisoner's Dilemma for 3 red. It's a sorcery that says each opponent secretly chooses Silence or Snitch. Then the choices are revealed. If each opponent chose Silence, Prisoner's Dilemma deals 4 damage to each of them. If each opponent chose Snitch, it deals 8 damage to them. Otherwise, it deals 12 damage to each opponent who chose Silence. So if one of the opponents picks Snitch and the other 2 pick Silence, the ones that picked Silence are going to take 12. If they all take Silence, they take 4. If they all take Snitch, they take 8. And somebody, if you're you have to politic your way around this card, because somebody could just as easily say, oh, well, we'll all pick Silence to make sure we all only take 4 damage. And then that one person underhandedly picks Snitch to blast them all for 12. There's a way to, you can get yourself turned on really easily in politics with this card. So be careful how you use this. That said, be careful using this card when you have your Fiendish Duo out. This was reprinted in the deck, and this card is really freaking expensive. I was very surprised to see this in this Precon. It doubles all the sources of your damage to your opponents. So with that out, you're going to deal 8, 16, and 24 damage depending on what thing happens with the Prisoner's Dilemma. We also have another vote card with Mob Verdict for 2 red. It's a sorcery secret council. Each player secretly votes for another player, and then those votes are revealed. For each vote an opponent received, Mob Verdict deals 2 damage to that player and each creature they control. For each vote you receive, you draw a card. So basically they get to go, okay, are you going to fry another opponent or are you going to give me cards? So this has an interesting dichotomy with it where they got to choose what they need to do here, because they could be like, okay, this person's got the biggest advantages and everybody votes, and then that person's going to take 6 damage for all the votes. And then maybe one of the other players is going to, that person that they're focusing on might give 2 damage to somebody else or give you a card in the process. That's probably the best case scenario of when you want to try to use this kind of card. And then the last new card in here is Trouble in Pairs for 2 white enchantment. If an opponent would begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn instead. And whenever an opponent attacks you with 2 or more creatures, draws their second card each turn, or casts their second spell each turn, you draw a card. So for 1 additional white mana, this is almost like a amped up variation of Smuggler's Share, where you get, your opponents are doing extra things on their turn, so you're going to get some extra benefits out of it, whether it's going to force them to skip their turns. You're going to get to draw extra cards. There's some different things going on here that kind of share the abilities of the Smuggler's Share, and it's pretty good. So as I said before, this version of the deck does its own thing and works out really well with keeping all the new stuff in the deck. However, if you want to play with Feather Radiant Arbiter at the head of the deck, well, the deck has got to go through some much more drastic changes. So let's take a look and see what I've done with that here. And there's going to be some new cards that come out as a result. So before we go through what I've cut out of this deck and what we're adding to it to make it more thematic, let's take a look at Feather Radiant Arbiter for red, white. You get a 4/3 angel with flying and lifelink. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell that targets only Feather Radiant Arbiter, you may choose any number of other target creatures that could target and pay 2 for each of those creatures. If you do, for each of those creatures, copy the spell. The copy targets the creature. Copies of permanent spells become tokens. That means not only can we copy instants and sorceries, we can also copy auras, which is kind of the big basis of how this deck is set up and why she doesn't really work really well in this deck. There's really not any auras in the deck or instants and sorceries that come in the deck that you really want to target her with and then copy to your own creatures, because a lot of it deals with goading and removal and all these other things. So instead, we're going to tilt this deck to work better with Feather. As such, we are going to stick with a lot of the same removals from the other deck: Ancient Stone Idol, Daring King of Keldar, Ateli Primal Storm, Lauren of the Third Path, Kazul, Gisela, Stalking Leonin, Elspeth, Winds of Wrath, Savine's Reclamation. These are all things that, again, deal with other planes. We don't want them in the deck because we want this to be as thematic to Ravnica as possible. However, this also means we're going to lose a lot of things that Nelly Borca actually worked really well with, including Nelly Borca herself is coming out of this variation. We're also going to remove Shiny Impetus because it deals with goad, Vow of Duty, and Vow of Lightning, because those auras actually make it so your opponents can't attack us, but we're not doing that kind of thing in this version. Agitator Ant, it's a goad mechanic, not doing that. Martial Impetus, same thing, more goading. Ransom Notes coming out of the new cards because of the goading mechanic, and it's just not that great here. Hot Pursuit and Immortal Obligation both coming out because, again, the goading stuff. Disrupt Discorum is coming out, goads. And then in order to actually fit in what I want to fit in, there's going to be a handful of cards that you could leave in, but I could not see a way to fit them in and get everything I wanted to put in here. So Soul Snare's coming out. We're also going to lose the copies of Ghostly Prison and Redemption Arc. All in all, there's going to be about 21 or 22 cards that come out of this version of the deck, so it's a lot heavier on the cuts compared to the other deck. So what are we adding in? Let's start with the creatures. Only 1 creature is going to carry over from the other set, and that's Aurelius Vindicator, because again, it's a good removal spell for us, and it's a good way to get back some of our stuff that's fallen into the graveyard. So what are we going to add to this deck to make it, more in tune with what Feather's doing? Well, let's look at the creatures. The first 3 creatures are some of the same ones that showed up in the other variation of the deck: Aurelius Vindicator, Keening Apparition, and Luminant Primordial, and they're here for the exact same reasons I included them with Nelly Borca. Good removal abilities, and just about it. That's about it for them. And then we have a card that hasn't been seen play in a very long time, Celestial Ancient. For 3 white, it's a 3/3 elemental with flying that says whenever you cast an enchantment spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So we have several enchantments in this deck, and some of which we can actually recycle and reuse. So it's a great way to help bolster our forces as we go along in the game. I'm also going to include a copy of Swiftblade Vindicator. For a red and a white, it's a 1/1 human soldier with double strike, vigilance, and trample. Since we're having the ability to stack up auras on this and put counters on things and just do all kinds of good stuff, this makes a great target for a lot of things that it'd be copied onto. So I wanted to include a copy of it, and it fits perfectly here because it's from the Boros Guild. Then since we're using Feather, we want a lot of auras here to help us get along and copy things. So let's include a couple of new ones. Let's start with Due Diligence. For 2 and a white, it's an aura that says when it enters the battlefield, target creature you control other than the enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and gains vigilance until end of turn, and the enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has a vigilance. So, you copy Feather, she gets a pretty good size, she has vigilance then, and then on top of that, you can give this to somebody else, and you can just start chaining these down until the last one is like, okay, I'm just going to get this. So you can actually pump up stuff as you go along and start targeting different things as you copy this. So like say you had Feather and 2 copies of this going on your stuff, you can be like, okay, the first copy resolves hitting Feather, this guy's going to get pumped up, and then the Due Diligence goes on that guy and it's going to pump Feather up, and then all 3 of them get that temporary boost and then can just swing wide. We're also going to include the copy of Convenient Target. For a red, it's an aura enchant creature. When it enters the battlefield, suspect enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and you can pay 2 and a red to bounce it back from your graveyard to your hand. So I like this because it's recyclable if the creature gets knocked into the graveyard or this gets disenchanted off the board. But on top of that, gives your creatures menace, essentially, even though they can't block. But then it's also the ability to pump and get things through. So I kind of like this one here, so we're going to use it. And then since we have so many red and white creatures in the deck, we're going to use Blessing of the Nephilim. For a white. You get an aura that says enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each of its colors. So on Feather, it's +2/+2. On Boros Reckoner, it's +2/+2. Anya, Merciless Angel, it's +2/+2. There's a lot of things that this just gives +2/+2 on, and you can and it's cheap, so it's easy to copy it multiple times as long as you have the mana to do so. And speaking of cheap auras, we have Ethereal Armor, and I did not realize this was from Ravnica, but it works great here because it's going to give our enchanted creatures +1/+1 for each enchantment you control, and it has first strike. And as we're copying, we're going to get multiple copies of these enchantments going onto the board, making Ethereal Armors almost multiplicative as they get spread around your creatures. Then I have a pair of enchantments that actually benefit our other enchantments being on our creatures. First up is Fencer's Mage Mark. For 2 and a red, enchant creature. Creatures you control that are enchanted get +1/+1 and have first strike. And Guardian's Mage Mark, which also has enchant creatures you control that are enchanted get +1/+1, and this one also has flash. So what you have the ability to do here is enchant different things to pump up, and then this actually aura will actually +1/+1 pump other creatures enchanted with other things. So this is kind of fun. And then on top of it, this stacks up. So if you're able to copy this multiple times, say you copy it, for, 7 mana, and make 3 copies of it. You go Guardian's Mage Mark, 2 copies. That's +3/+3 for all enchanted creatures. So it works really, really well. Same thing goes with the Fencer's Mage Mark. And then Gatecrash blessed us with a 4 mana enchantment aura that says enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from creatures. So if you have the ability to punch something through on the ground and you need it to get through for sure, then you can put this on Feather, and then you can start, spreading it around the line if you have enough mana to copy it. Or you can just slam it down on one of your creatures and make sure that gets through. If you have to just slap this on a creature, there's a couple of good targets here in Swiftblade Vindicator or the Havoc Eater that comes with the deck, because it's a big threat, and if they can't block it, it's going to chew into their life total really, really fast. Then we're going to veer into another cheap aura in Madcap Skills. For 1 and a red, you get an enchantment aura, enchant creature. It gets +3/+0 and has menace. So I love being able to take this and just be like, all right, we're just going to give you essentially a Loxodon Warhammer without the life link, and just be like, boom, okay, now you got to block with 2 creatures, and this thing is huge, and you're just gonna be able to copy this multiple times because it's so cheap anyways. Our next aura is actually very much on theme with this set, and that is Murder Investigation. For 1 and a white, you get an aura enchant creature you control. When the enchanted creature dies, put X 1/1 white soldier tokens onto the battlefield where X is its power. So if you're able to copy this multiple times and spread them around, if somebody board wipes you, they're just going to leave you behind with a bunch of soldier tokens, which can then just take them out later. Then moving on to the instants and sorceries, we're going to include 3 from the original deck that I added in: Boros Charm, Mizium Mortars, and Unbreakable Formation, all for the same reasons as before. We're also going to include a copy of Storm Herd. Now, this was from the original Ravnica sets, so it fits in perfectly here, and it replaces Darien, King of Keldor, as a big way to burst in a bunch of tokens onto the board for us, and it gives us a bunch of flyers. So this is kind of cool in the deck, and I like that it came from Ravnica, so it fits in perfectly here. And then we know that the auras are not the only thing that we can copy with Feather. We can also do instants and sorceries. Well, in this case, we're going to copy Wojek Siren. For 1 mana, you get an instant with Radiance. Target creature and each other creature that shares a color with it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This can get kind of crazy because if you're able to target multicolored creatures, you're going to go ahead and basically pump up everything, and you can copy this multiple times. So you could easily see +3, +4, even upwards of +5 damage going onto all your creatures in one big go if you target Feather with this first and then copy it multiple times. And then the last 2 cards, we're going to include 1 from the other deck, Connecting the Dots. Again, same reasons. You get to attack, you get a way to fill your hand back up, but in this deck, it's actually even more important because we don't have the card advantage of Nelly Borca. And then we're also going to include a card that I completely forgot about until I was looking at this stuff: Sphere of Safety. Since this deck has so many enchantments in it, this is a much better card than the Ghostly Prison that's included in the deck. For 4 and a white, you get an enchantment. Creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays X for each of those creatures, where X is the number of enchantments you control. So rather than having to pay, a couple mana per attacker or whatever it is, you instead have to pay, upwards of 5, 6, 7, depending on how many, enchantments you copy with her. This thing could get to the point where if they don't get rid of the Sphere of Safety, they're never going to touch you for the rest of the game. So that was the Blame Game deck, broken down into 2 variations. I just felt I had to do that because the 2 commanders just don't mesh well together, and trying to force them to do so would have watered the deck down immensely. And I just wanted to give you guys a couple of choices that you could use if you wanted to use either one of them. With that said, if you like what I did here, please let me know down in the comments below if there's a card I forgot to include that you think I should have from the Ravnica block, or something I shouldn't have included that I did show here. Let me know that as well. If you like what I'm doing here and you want to be updated when I go ahead and put the next update video out for these precons, go ahead and subscribe while you're down there as well. And as always, thank you for watching and have a great day.